New Orleans in 1918 was a city of sweat, steam, and shadows. Jazz poured from every open window, mixing with the scent of gumbo and gunpowder, a place where life pulsed hard and loud, day and night. The war in Europe was ending, and the Spanish flu was creeping across the city like a fevered ghost. But there was something else, something worse, stalking the back alleys and shotgun houses, something no one could name. The first blow came quietly, in the early hours of May 23, 1918. Joseph and Catherine Maggio were asleep in their small apartment above the grocery store they ran on the corner of Upper Line and Magnolia Streets. He was Italian, like many grocers in New Orleans at the time. She was his wife. Neither would live to see the sunrise. A neighbor heard strange sounds, not screams, but something dull, like furniture being moved. He told police he brushed it off. People move things all the time. But the next morning, when Joseph's brother called for him and got no answer, he broke the door down. What he found was enough to silence even a hardened man. Joseph had been nearly decapitated in bed. His throat was slit so deeply it was almost a beheading. Catherine was found beside him, still alive but barely, her skull fractured from a brutal blow. She died minutes later. A straight razor, covered in blood, was found discarded in the bathroom. In the kitchen, the doorframe had been chiseled open. The killer had removed a panel to slip inside. Nothing was stolen. Money, jewelry, valuables, all left untouched. The newspapers went mad with speculation, a robbery gone wrong, a personal vendetta, but nothing fit. The wounds were too savage, the entry too deliberate. Then, just a month later, it happened again. On June 27th, Louis Bezumer and his mistress Harriet Lowe were attacked in a similar fashion. He was struck with an axe as he slept in the back room of his grocery store. Harriet, too, was hit in the head, but she survived long enough to speak. Her injuries were horrific. She claimed Louis was a German spy, a detail the press ran wild with in wartime hysteria. But beneath the rumors, one detail stood out. Once again, the attacker had chiseled through the back door and left the axe behind. Fear started to spread. The people of New Orleans were used to crime, but this was different. This felt personal, surgical in its savagery. Police searched for connections. Most victims were grocers, often Italian immigrants, always attacked in their homes with weapons they themselves owned. But the killer never left fingerprints, never made a sound anyone noticed, and never took a thing. Only blood only lives. On August 5th, Anna Schneider, 8 months pregnant, was attacked in her sleep. She survived. Her child, miraculously, was born healthy 2 days later. Then, just 5 days later, Joseph Romano, another Italian grocer, was found bleeding from 2 gashes to the head. His nieces, who had been sleeping in the house, saw the attacker. They described a large man in dark clothes, a slouched hat pulled low, vanishing into the shadows. Joseph died 2 days later. His axe, once again, was left behind. By now, the city was in a state of panic. People started sleeping in shifts, boarding up their doors, buying guard dogs. Newspapers printed exaggerated illustrations of the killer. Some made him look like a demon, others a phantom. But it was the Times-Picayune that first used the name Axeman. And then came the letter. On March 13, 1919, the Times-Picayune received a typed letter postmarked from hell, or so it claimed. It was addressed from the Axeman and read, in part, "They have never caught me, and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. At 12:15 earthly time, on next Tuesday night, I'm going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I'm going to make a little proposition. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared whose home has a jazz band in full swing at the time I have just mentioned." That night, March 19, 1919, the city of New Orleans turned into one giant jazz party. Every dance hall was packed. Brass bands played on street corners. Houses that couldn't afford musicians played records at full volume. Strangers danced together, drunk on terror and music. And in the middle of it all, the Axeman, if he existed, kept his word. No one died that night, but the killings resumed months later. On August 10, 1919, grocer Steve Boca was attacked in the same pattern. skull crushed, axe left behind. He survived, but remembered nothing. On September 3rd, Sarah Laman was found unconscious, head bleeding, her doorframe chiseled. She also lived. The final known attack came on October 27th. Mike Pepitone was found in his bedroom, his wife screaming over his body. Blood covered the walls. A figure was seen fleeing, but never caught. And then, just as suddenly as he arrived, the Axeman was gone. No arrest was ever made, no definitive suspect ever named. Some believed he was a local man, perhaps someone who worked with tools who knew the grocers by trade. Others believed he was more than human, a dark spirit feeding off fear, vanishing back into the jazz-soaked streets of New Orleans. Decades later, theories still swirl. Was it organized crime? A hate crime spree? A deranged serial killer with a pattern and a poetic streak? Or was it something else entirely, something the city itself conjured, born from its unique cocktail of music, mysticism, and madness? What remains is a trail of broken lives and a legacy of fear. The Axeman didn't just kill people, he haunted a city. And for a few nights in 1919, he held it in his grip, tight and cold. The ghost of his jazz ultimatum still echoes through the French Quarter, where tourists sip cocktails and street musicians play well into the night. But some of the old-timers will tell you, on certain evenings, just after midnight, if the music falls quiet for even a second, you might feel him watching. The morning of June 10, 1912, began quietly in Villisca. Eoa, the kind of town where people left their doors unlocked, walked to church together, and knew every neighbor by name. But as the sun rose over that warm Monday morning, something was wrong on the corner of 2nd and Josiah Street. The Moore House, a white, modest two-story home near the center of town, sat still. Too still. Mary Peckham, the Moore's next-door neighbor, had expected to see the family out early, tending to chores. But the yard was empty, no sounds of children playing, no laundry being hung. No movement in the windows. By 8 a.m., Mary was concerned enough to knock on the door. No answer. She checked the door, locked. She let the family's chickens out and waited a little longer before finally calling Josiah Moore's brother, Ross. When Ross arrived with his own set of keys and stepped inside, what he found would burn itself into the memory of the town and the country for the next century. Inside, the house was deathly quiet. The curtains were drawn. Every mirror had been covered. The air was heavy, cloying, unnatural. Ross didn't make it past the parlor before he stumbled out in shock and called for the town's marshal. Inside the Moore home, someone had murdered 8 people, 2 adults and 6 children, while they slept in their beds. Josiah Moore, 43, and his wife Sarah, 39, had been bludgeoned to death in their bed, their faces shattered by the blunt end of an axe. The weapon, Josiah's own, had been found propped against the wall in the guest room, stained with blood and tissue. The killer had used the blade on the parents and then, disturbingly, the blunt end on the children. The Moore children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, ages 5 to 11, had all been murdered the same way. All found tucked neatly into bed, their skulls crushed, the sheets pulled up over their faces, as if the killer had lingered long enough to cover his work. But the horror didn't end there. That night, 2 guests had been staying over, Lena and Ina Stillinger, sisters aged 12 and 8. They had joined Catherine Moore for a church children's program on Sunday evening and were invited to spend the night. The killer murdered them as well in the guest room. Sometime in the early hours of June 10th, Lena, investigators noted, may have awakened before the blow. Her body was found partially off the bed, her nightgown pushed up. A large bloodstain was on her thigh. There were signs she had fought back. It was the only sign of struggle in the house. The killer had taken his time. After the murders, he stayed in the house. He covered the mirrors. He draped clothing over the broken faces. He made a plate of food he never ate. He left a bowl of bloody water on the kitchen table, likely where he washed his hands. The axe was left behind. Every clock in the house had stopped between midnight and 2 a.m. Word of the crime spread rapidly. Within hours, a crowd of neighbors, reporters, and curiosity seekers surrounded the Moore home. In a tragic misstep, dozens of people were allowed to walk through the crime scene before police cordoned it off. Fingerprints were smudged. Evidence was likely destroyed, In the end, no one was ever arrested for the murders. The investigation that followed spiraled in every direction. There were suspects, yes, plenty of them, but no one ever truly fit. One theory focused on a serial killer, possibly someone who had been riding the rails and committing similar crimes. Indeed, multiple axe murders across the Midwest occurred in the years before and after Villisca. All shared a few disturbing patterns: victims bludgeoned in their sleep, mirrors covered, food left untouched, and nothing stolen. It was a chilling idea that a faceless killer had passed through the town, murdered a family, and vanished into the darkness. Then there was the traveling preacher. Reverend George Kelly was a peculiar man. Small in stature, with a twitchy demeanor and a past riddled with mental instability. He was in Villisca the night of the murders, having attended the same church service the Moore family went to hours before their deaths. He left town early the next morning, too early, some said. Over time his behavior grew more erratic. He wrote letters to the authorities. He reportedly confessed to the crime during a mental breakdown, then retracted it. Years later, he was arrested, tried, and acquitted. No solid evidence ever tied him to the crime. Another suspect was Frank Jones, a wealthy local businessman and state senator who had once employed Josiah Moore. Rumors swirled of bad blood between the men, with some saying Josiah had left Frank's company and taken valuable business, and maybe even a mistress, with him. But no evidence ever connected Jones to the murders. The theory that he hired a killer lingered in whispers, but never in court. The town tried to move on, but it couldn't. The house sat quiet for years, its reputation growing darker with each passing decade. Locals said strange things happened there: voices in the walls, footsteps on empty floors, doors opening on their own. Children refused to walk past it. Some swore they saw faces in the windows at night. In the late 20th century, the house was restored and opened for tours. Paranormal investigators from all over the world came to spend the night. Many left shaken. Some didn't make it through the night at all. In 2014, a man staying in the house for a paranormal investigation was found bleeding in the dark, stabbed in the chest with his own knife. He survived, but never explained what made him do it. The authorities ruled it self-inflicted. He said only this: "Something in that house got to me." To this day, the Villisca axe murders remain unsolved. No fingerprints, no motive, no final answer. Just a family wiped out in the middle of the night, 8 lives stolen in silence, and a small town left with scars that never healed. If the killer was a stranger, he left no name. If he was someone from Villisca, he took the secret to his grave. But the house still stands, and at night if you walk past it, especially in the humid, windless dark, some say you can hear footsteps upstairs, soft, deliberate, as if someone is still moving room to room, waiting for the lights to go out.